Hello, everyone. Welcome to Court with Krissy. After an apartment maintenance employee is fired, it leads to the complex being placed on lockdown. Now, the respondent, who was seen red, asked Judge Rossi to drop the PPO. See what happens. I hope you like it. Court with Krissy is now in session.
We are here in the matters of Brianne Filman versus Zoe Chelsky, case number 24-03783PH, and April Brandlow versus Zoe Chelsky, case number 24-03616PH. This hearing is being recorded on Zoom and live streamed on YouTube.
And this matter, or these two matters, come before the court today for an evidentiary hearing on Ms. Chelsky's motion to terminate PPOs entered by Ms. Bandalo and Ms. Filman. So, as an initial matter, counsel, why don't you place your appearance on the record?
Absolutely. David Sostek on behalf of petitioners, P78171.
Very good. And to clarify, Mr. Shostak, you're going to appear on behalf of both petitioners?
Correct, Your Honor.
Okay, very good. Could you do me a favor and file an appearance in the Bandalo case after today's hearing?
Absolutely.
Very good. And Ms. Chelsky, could you state and spell your full name for the record, please?
Oh yeah, it's Zoe Chelsky, and it's ZoeyChulski.
Very good. All right. Thank you, Ms. Chelsky. And Ms. Chelsky, these are your objections to PPOs that I entered on behalf of the petitioners. I will swear you in and give you an opportunity to make a counterstatement of the facts as they stand in your experience and your testimony today. Then Mr. Shostak will have an opportunity to cross-examine you as well, and then I can rule on whether or not these PPOs will stay in place. So if you would please raise your right hand, Ms. Chelsky. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Very good. And Ms. Chelsky, why shouldn't I keep, I looked at these two petitions again, and of course I initially did grant these, and it involved basically some alleged threatening behavior by you after I think your termination from employment, maybe as the working at the management of an apartment complex. Why don't you describe for me, in your own words, your view of what happened?
So basically, I was terminated under what I believe to be some false pretenses.
What was your job at the complex?
I was the service technician at Knapps Corner Flats.
Okay, and is that an apartment complex or those condos? What's the kind of arrangement at Knapps Corner?
It's a 6-building complex, apartments.
Okay, and so you were the service tech, so you were the person that would go around and fix stuff in the apartments if something wasn't, my faucet, for example, was broken, you would come and see if you could fix it.
Yep.
Okay, all right, that makes it clear for me. You can continue.
And so I was terminated. I was a little agitated, not so much by the termination, but by the 72 hours to move out. And so I tossed my keys on the desk after she had asked me to return them. And I said, all right, I'm going to go grab my stuff. And I was agitated. Walked back to the shop, started grabbing my things, and I was miffed. I was throwing things into my car. April had said, can you, you're going to have to return your uniform. So I took my sweater off and I tossed it to her. I was expecting her to catch it. She did not. And eventually I kind of gave up on yelling, and I just I walked back upstairs and I called my old coworker. And I said, hey, hey, I just got terminated. I want to bring you my firearm so that you can hold on to it until this bad time of mine passes over. Just for my own safety. And so I walked downstairs with it, and little did I know that the police were there. They had seen me with it, and now at this point, the police are thinking, oh, disgruntled employee with a firearm.
Yeah, and can you clarify for me what kind of firearm it is?
It was an AR-15.
Okay, like a sling where you over your shoulder? How are you carrying it?
Oh, it was slung over my chest.
Okay, all right.
At which point I was legally open carrying.
Yeah.
To walk downstairs. And before I got in the car, I wanted to cool off a little bit, and so I didn't hop in a car.
Yeah.
Told
Do you have
him,
the
hey,
magazine and the rifle at the time?
yep.
Okay.
Told him, hey, I'm gonna bring my gun. Noticed the cops there. They seen me with it. At which point I walked back. I put it in my car. Just so I'm not interacting with the police with a firearm.
Makes sense.
I figured, I wanted to de-escalate the situation with the police. And at which point, after about, 90 minutes, they decided to place me in custody for having a loaded firearm in the car. Not so much for threatening individuals with it, but just,
Yeah, improper storage. Yeah.
Yeah, instead of open carrying, I decided to de-escalate and put it in the car.
Your
Which,
Honor?
of course, has a whole different set of rules as to how you can carry it. So, yeah.
Yeah. So bad decision, bad timing. It was bad all around. And at which point, I think it was 3 days later, I don't know, probably a week later, I was served with the PPO over the phone for April Bandalo. At which point I had I filed a motion to terminate. I had my mom go out to her house to serve her the paperwork. Per the court clerk, saying that was okay. In David Sostek's motion, he had says that just the fact of me serving her paperwork made her feel uncomfortable. And was also a violation of the PPO, which I don't believe it is.
Well, and there is no violation pending right now. So, yeah, and we're not talking about a violation here. We're just talking about your motions to terminate it. So, yeah, so you serve the responses via your mom.
Yep.
To them, and that's why we're here today, is on your motion to terminate the PPOs. Yeah, no, so, and can you just to backtrack a hair, can you describe what was April's position at the facility?
Her position is the senior area director. So she is Bree Filman's supervisor or boss, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, okay, so she's kind of in charge of the whole complex then?
Yeah, she's in charge of multiple complexes across West Michigan. And then
Understood.
Bree is just in charge of Knapps Corner Flats.
Got it. And so April would not necessarily be only at Knapps Corner all the time. She might be at other locations too.
Correct. I have only seen her a handful of times.
Okay. Yeah. And you said that did you get an eviction notice at the same time? Was that the scenario?
Yeah. So during the termination, I was told I had 72 hours to move. And we ended up going to court for that, and it was found that according to the court, that I did threaten them, not expressly but indirectly.
Sure.
Just due to the fact that I had a firearm was threatening enough. And I have since, as of, I want to say April 17th, I have moved out since. And I
Okay.
no longer live at the complex.
Okay. And so now you're not in I mean, there really isn't much day-to-day risk of crossing paths with either of the petitioners. Obviously, I think you're still precluded by this from possessing your firearm.
Yes, and due to my pending weapons charge as well, that also precludes me from owning a firearm.
That would do it. And the weapons charge is currently pending. Is it in the district court?
No, I did not like the prosecutor's offer, so we ended up taking that up to circuit.
Okay. Do you know which judge you're assigned to in the circuit?
Nope, I don't have a court date set up yet. The attorney says it could be 6 to 8 weeks before circuit court gets around to it.
Boy, I'd like to think we're faster than that, but that could be true. We do have a lot of cases. So, okay, all right, I understand. And and then the engagement of Brianne Filman that same day, she was the employee that was accompanying you during this whole well, and to be clear, there first was a termination, and then based on what happened during the termination, they told you were being evicted as well. Is that the right sequence?
Yes and no. Basically it said it was all within 5 minutes. She said, well, we're terminating you, and your lease also states that we have the right to evict you in 72 hours. We're going to exercise that.
Because of the threatening behavior?
No, because of the termination.
Oh, I see. Okay, that was a term of employment, as it were.
Yes.
Okay, I understand. And did you get your was your apartment there somewhat subsidized or partly paid for by the fact that you were working there?
Yeah, it was a 20% discount.
Okay. All right. Okay. I think I understand the kind of the sequence of events here. And I right, anytime, and I get it. And you know, I am a Second Amendment advocate. However, certainly can see when there's a heated situation, where an open carry, particularly if it's an AR-15, can be viewed as a separate threatening, even though it doesn't sound like. In fact, your intention was to take the weapon out of the situation by carrying it, not necessarily to escalate the situation.
Yes. Yeah. My intention was definitely not to escalate the situation. It was I only went upstairs to grab it to take it to a friend.
Got it.
Just due to my own mental issues that are well documented at this point. I figured it was best to take it out of the situation than to bring it into the situation.
Yeah, no, that seems like a wise choice, although of course just
Was the timing right? Probably not.
In moving it got introduced into the situation anyway. So
Right.
okay, I understand. All right. Well, I think those are all of my questions. I'll give Mr. Shostak an opportunity to inquire at this point. Mr. Shostak.
Thank you. I don't think I have any real questions for a cross-examination. My clients have a different perspective of the facts, but that's not something that I'm going to get through from Ms. Chulsky.
Sure. Did you represent the facility and your clients on the eviction as well?
I did, Your Honor. And
which judge were you in front of?
Ayub.
Okay. All right. Well, that's in the city of GR then, not in here I am in my head. This is all happening in 63rd District Court, but it's in 61st. Okay. All right.
Your Honor, did you get a chance to review the respondents or the petitioner's response?
I did.
Okay, great. So I don't have any questions for cross right now.
Okay. All right. And okay. All right. Well, then I don't have any further questions either, Ms. Chilsky. You may step down from the witness stand. Unless do you want to call any additional witnesses at this time, Ms. Chilsky?
No, I don't have any that I want to put in a position to compromise their jobs.
I understand. Okay. All right. Well, then let me give Mr. Shostak an opportunity. Mr. Shostak, do you have any proofs that you wish to put on this time?
I would like to first make a motion, and that is to deny the respondent's request, based on what she has said. There aren't issues that would set aside the PPO that has already been entered. What she did discuss was already addressed at a hearing. It took about an hour, and Judge Ayub took an immediate hearing for that, and he heard her testimony that was similar to what you heard just now, and my client's testimony, and said, you know what, under the statute of threatening other individuals on landlord-owned property, there is a valid basis here. And he took the extraordinary step of prohibiting contact and threatening and intimidating behavior from Ms. Chulsky for both of the petitioners and other employees and residents at the landlord's premises. So in terms of things that she might say, no, it wasn't interpreted that way. The police report and the actual judgment that touched on those issues, I believe, is conclusively the opposite. So
Okay.
this would move to deny the motion, and if the court denies that, I would put on some proofs.
All right. Well, based on the factual differences in the accounts here, I mean, of course, I didn't observe any of the events. I kind of hear them third person, and I do know, having practiced employment law, that both a termination and an eviction are just inherently emotional confrontational events, most so for the tenant and the employee being terminated, somewhat less for the managers. However, it's well known that, tempers can flare, things can be said during those times. And I certainly can see, the makings of an escalated situation. And of course, it doesn't always happen that way. Sometimes an employee will just quietly clean out their desk and leave when they're terminated, and sometimes not. And I've seen everything in between in my own personal experience here. So, and I certainly think that Judge Ayub's opinion, though, I certainly can consider it. Along the way here is not necessarily conclusive of the PPO, because the standard of proof is quite a bit different. So I will deny the motion to dismiss at this point, the objection, and we can proceed to any proofs that you have, Mr.
Okay.
Shostak.
Thank you. I'd first like to call Ms. Bandalo.
Very well. Ms. Van Lowe, would you raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Thank you. Ms. Bandalo, could you please describe your position with the employer or former employer of Ms. Chulsky?
Yes, I am the regional director, so I oversee, as Zoe stated, a portfolio of assets throughout West Michigan that have an operating team on each one. So they have a service team department, a sales department, and an operations department at each one. And then I oversee those, working more directly with the client.
Okay. And were you there on April 11th when Ms. Chulsky was terminated?
Yes.
Why were you there?
I was there to participate and support the manager through the termination. It's not typically something I come for, but this was a unique circumstance, so I just wanted to be there.
Why was it unique?
For the reason for termination, and then prior behavior
Can you please
that just
expand on the reason and the prior behavior?
reason for termination was Zoe had participated in an after-hours service request from a resident where they call the line and they come in for the service request, and had made the resident uncomfortable in their home because they stated that she just wouldn't leave, wasn't taking hints to leave, lingered for too long, and said some what she felt like and we agreed with were inappropriate comments about her mental health, about her tactical advantage to pick off police officers from her balcony, and things like that. It made the resident incredibly uncomfortable. The resident is a Grand Rapids Police Department resident. They came in the next day, shared that with us. So we had 2 prior formal written warnings for various things, and didn't always receive those well. So I just wanted to be there to support the manager through that.
Can you describe the meeting that occurred with Ms. Chulsky and include any items that may have been thrown at anybody?
So we sat down with Zoe in Bree's
Who is we?
office. Myself and Bree Filman sat down with Zoe in Bree's office. We let her know that she had been terminated. It is not always customary that we exercise the employee addendum, but given the circumstances with this particular situation, it was felt best that she also vacate the property in conjunction with that. Obviously, Zoe was upset. I've been in those moments where people are upset before. This was different, of course. She did throw her keys. The statement is from Ms. Chulsky is that she tossed them onto the desk. However, they were thrown at the desk, skidded across it, and hit the window behind the desk. So I'm not sure how that constitutes a toss.
Tossed, or was that like thrown with force?
I would think thrown with force.
How close was that to you?
So there was a desk here. Myself and Bree are sitting here, and she was on the direct other side of the desk. So we were within 4 feet, I would say, from each other. And then the window was just 2 feet behind us. They skidded through, hit the blind/window pane behind us.
Was there any sort of on that day, was there any sort of a physical incident besides that?
In that particular meeting in the office?
Did she throw her uniform as well?
No. So the situation was that she walked out of the office, the clubhouse at that point, obviously very agitated, and was heading towards our maintenance shop where all tools, golf carts, all of those things are kept to collect her belongings. I called the service manager on duty at that point just to give him a heads up that she was coming over, that she was agitated, and to please just separate yourself so that we're not creating a confrontation. He didn't answer. As a member, I can't allow her to go as a recently terminated associate in that state, go to the maintenance shop without some other Village Green associate being present. We don't do that anytime there's a termination. Somebody observes while you unpack your desk just to make sure you're not taking anything proprietary or damaging anything along the way. So because he didn't answer, I didn't want him just being kind of confronted with this situation, not having been a part of it just a few minutes before. So I went behind and followed out to the shop just to oversee that process myself. I asked Bree to stay at the clubhouse. When I got to the maintenance shop, Jason was there, which is why he didn't answer my phone call. Zoe was incredibly agitated at that point, was throwing things, as she stated, from the shop to her vehicle, which was parked in a parking spot across the parking lot.
What's that distance, would you say?
30 feet.
So
it's like a parking garage. It's a garage bay, and then there's space for cars to drive back and forth because it's a parking lot, and then spaces to park on the other side of that. So whatever that makes. And then there was a tool that she, like a box case type thing that she had thrown into the back of her trunk. And then when she walked over, she realized that one of those items wasn't hers, threw that back into the garage. It skidded.
Was that near you?
Yes, it was right between Jason and I. The sweatshirt piece, I don't remember specifically saying anything about the uniforms, but obviously it was heat of the moment. I was a little bit tense at that moment. But she's right, you would have to eventually return those. So she did take off her sweatshirt. She didn't toss it. I find that interesting, I guess. I'm no athlete, but I would certainly be able to catch a tossed sweatshirt. But it was whipped and it went on top of my face, and I just like pulled it off. There were moments where I had been repeatedly asking in that interaction to please just leave. This is not a productive conversation. I would be happy to talk to you about the length of your eviction. You know, we can have that, but this is not the moment. This is not a productive conversation. Please just leave. Please just leave. Please just leave.
Did you feel threatened by her behavior?
Yes, because she was, I think that like there are several moments in my career that I've been confronted with agitated people. And the only time that I've ever felt uncomfortable is when I can tell that that person is no longer they're no longer there. She was seeing, she was just seeing red. I mean, there was one moment where I was backed up against some boxes or something, and I couldn't back up any further. And she was standing in front of me, quite literally growling in my face. And I was like, you're not saying words. Like, can you please back up? Like, this is really uncomfortable. Can you please just go? We can talk about it. We can talk about this termination, because the housing thing, I think, was really the biggest rub for Zoe. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
That she's agitated. Ms. Chalsky also used that word. Can you provide some more descriptive terms for how you determined agitation?
Yelling very loudly, profanity, marching back and forth, shaking. I could see that her body was shaking, holding things up, and when talking, like she held this big wrench up at one point and was yelling and kind of shaking it in the air at the same point. Just really, really angry, yelling, screaming,
and
swearing, marching, throwing, agitated, I guess.
And at one point, did you or someone at the property call the police?
Bree Filman had called the police before I even walked out of the clubhouse to go to the maintenance shop.
Okay.
Because of her agitation at that moment. I believe that's how that went. I believe she called as I was like walking out the door.
And Ms. Chalsky said that at one point she went up to her apartment to retrieve her weapon.
Mm-hmm.
Do you remember the point at which she left?
Yes. Jason and I were leaving the garage. So it's a garage door and then like an access door. So we had hit the garage door to close button and we were coming out the front. She had kicked her leg underneath it to open the garage door back up. I don't remember exactly why, just like no, I'm not done yet. We said we're done. And then I asked Jason to walk me up to the clubhouse. She walked away. I went up to her apartment. I got up to the clubhouse, saw that the police were there, went up to talk to them. They told me to go inside because they had seen her with her weapon slung, and to like close the blinds and turn off the lights in the clubhouse.
When you became aware that she had the weapon slung, did you think about what she had said before about picking off police at her apartment?
No, honestly, because while those are inappropriate words and words to not say, what made me very uncomfortable and is just that I don't believe she was in control of her actions at that moment because she was so angry.
And
So
she
that's what I was fearful of, is because when someone's on that freight train, it's hard to get off. And then when you're on that freight train and then you have I didn't know loaded, I didn't know slung, I didn't know any of that in that moment. I just was told, police officer, they were loading all their things. And I was like, oh, wow, what the deuce is going on? This seems dramatic for what just occurred. Like, yes, we should go talk to her and just make sure, but like, this feels dramatic for what I just witnessed. And then he said, no, you need to go inside. She's got a weapon.
Objection, hearsay.
what's the
Right.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection on the hearsay. You may proceed with your examination, Mr. Shostak.
what's the time frame that from the time the termination meeting started until she left to go to her apartment?
20 minutes, 25 minutes max. And time from being at the club or being on property with the weapon to us separating, a minute, maybe.
Okay. And have you ever given her your home address?
No,
Is there any reason she would have your home address?
no.
Do you know of any easily accessible way to get your home address?
I Googled myself to see how easily that would be accessed, and it's not so easy.
Okay. Can you describe the situation about when you were served with a response?
This woman was on my porch, and I went out to speak with her, asked my son to sit inside because I wasn't expecting anybody. I asked her who she was. She said she couldn't say. And I said, okay. And she said, are you April Bandalo? And I said, yes. And she just put the papers in my hands. And I was like, what's this? And was quickly trying to read it and absorb it all, but this is not a world that I'm used to. So my anxiety went phew, and I was not able to really kind of comprehend what I was even really reading. I kept asking, like, do you know her? And I said, are you a friend of Zoe's? And she said, I'm not a good friend. And I said, oh, okay. Like, you know her though? And like, why are you on my porch? Like, what? This is just a little uncomfortable.
Was it just
And
the act of receiving papers that was uncomfortable, or was there something?
partially, but primarily the fact that it was a personal friend. I thought friend. I didn't know mother until just this hearing. But a personal acquaintance of Zoe's. Like, that was uncomfortable. Her ambiguity was uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable to have somebody come to your home and not be willing to state who they are, what they're doing. She became a bit agitated because my neighbor was across the street and just kind of recognized that the situation felt strange. So walked over, and she kind of was mouthing and agitated towards my neighbor. She got in her car. She sat in her car for a while in front of my house afterwards. You're probably going to add about 10 minutes. I have security cameras. I never went back to see how long she sat out there before she knocked on my door. I can rewind and go look at that. I don't think it's pertinent. Didn't feel like it was an important part of my time. But it was more just the crossing that line, I think, of comfortability.
Did it seemed more like, more than just dropping off papers? Is that?
Yeah, because I think if it was like a hired clerk, they would have been like, here you go, it doesn't matter, see you later, they're in your hands. They wouldn't have like lingered and talked and, you know what I mean, like become agitated, and it would have been business.
Okay. And
business, I understand.
On April 17th, back at the property, there was a police follow-up. Were you on site at that point?
I was not, no.
Okay. I'll ask Ms. Filman more about that. Let's see. Are there
I
other?
showed up when she called me to let me know I did come, but at that point, Zoe had already been removed or left or whatever.
And were the police still there when you arrived?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are there other situations that after the termination of Zoe that made you uncomfortable or in fear for your safety?
I think just really the perception of the continued agitation. 6 days later from the termination, we're back in front of the clubhouse, pacing back and forth and doing all of those things that are in the report there. I think it's the continued agitation that this clearly doesn't feel like it's fallen away at this moment. The knowledge of my home and the fear of the intent that is believed. I mean, I don't know that we've really touched on this, but the weapon was brought past where the vehicle was.
Mm-hmm.
If it was merely to put in your car, then you wouldn't have walked the 200 yards past your car up at the clubhouse with a loaded assault rifle. You would have put it in your car. And had the police not been there in that moment, 15, 30 seconds would have changed many lives. And even if nothing drastic happened, it would have caused trauma to me. It would have put Zoe in a much worse situation. It would have been bad all around 15 seconds later if the cops had not been there.
Have you observed any behavior issues that are related to what you referred to as her mental state or her mental illness?
I'm sorry, what do you mean? Like since that stage or?
Are you specifically aware of how her mental illness has affected her behavior?
Based off of what she shared, yes.
I'm going to object based on she's not an expert in mental health.
Yeah.
I'm asking.
Which is why my response was based off of what she shared. I'm to Zoe's point, I'm not an expert. I'm not in Zoe's brain. I don't know, but I know that it did not feel in any way that she was in control of her actions that day, and she was incredibly agitated. And that is when I'm nervous.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection. I'm just taking it for the factual portion of the testimony, not that it's in any way related to any mental health diagnosis, because the witness is a lay witness and not an expert. With that, you may proceed, Mr. Sustick.
Thank you. And Ms. Bandalo, how many, I'm going to say, employee terminations have you overseen, would you estimate?
Been with Village Green for 15 years this June, probably 20 to 30.
Okay. And
over the 15 years.
Have you ever had things thrown at you as part of a termination?
No.
Have you ever, so never had a tool thrown at you? Have you ever been backed up into a wall like you described?
No.
Okay. So this does seem like it was significantly more extreme than anything you've experienced. Is that correct?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Agitation, sure. But
and again, the reason that you're fearful is because of the continuing pattern. Is that correct?
yeah, it's the continuing pattern and just the lack of ownership over the situation with the weapon. Like, I wish we could just say, like, crap, I lost my mind, I made a huge mistake. But I think it's the reinforcement of trying to paint it as putting it in the vehicle. That would make sense to me if it wasn't you passed the vehicle and we're on the other side of the garage bays from the vehicle. We were nowhere near the vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
And I wish that if it would feel so much more comfortable if it was like, yep, whoa, lost my mind. I'm here, I'm present. Super sorry about that. Let's move on.
Okay.
But it just doesn't feel like that's the case, and we're just going to keep going down this path.
And while Ms. Chelsky is no longer residing at Village Green, has she expressed an intention or desire to return that you're aware of?
No.
To visit people? Okay.
Not to me or anyone that I've spoken to.
Okay. Is there anything else you'd like to share right now?
No.
Your Honor, I'm done with my direct questions on this witness.
Very good. I'll pass the witness to Ms. Chulsky for any cross-examination questions.
Okay. So Miss Bandalo, you said that you called Jason to let him know about the situation. Is that correct?
To let him know that you were on your way to the shop.
Okay. So was he aware that I was being terminated before what happened at the shop?
Yes.
Objection, relevance.
Response on relevance, Ms. Chulsky?
I guess I have none.
Okay, I'll sustain
Is
the objection then on the relevance of that question. However, you may continue with your examination.
Okay. Did you personally file the petition for personal protection?
Did I personally file it? Yes, I did it online.
Okay. When you filed it, did you
Mhm.
list your personal address on the petition?
Probably, I don't know, to be honest with you.
Would it be out of the realm of reason to say that somebody could have gotten your address from the petition?
I don't know.
What's
Is that where you got it? I don't know. Sure. I don't know if it's on there. I would have to pull the PPO and review it to see. I don't know that I listed it, but I don't specifically remember. It was
Okay.
a cat.
So yes, you did list it on the protection. That's
All right.
where I got it. I didn't have to do any searching at all.
Okay. See, and like that makes me like I understand that.
Okay, and then on the 17th, you said that you were not at Knapps Corner Flats at the time.
No, I was at Savannah.
Okay, so you had no idea what was happening outside of what you were being told.
I was called by Bree, and then the police officer, I believe, also called me just to let me know. Oh, actually, no, he did. He did. He called me, or I called him, one of the two, because we spoke on the phone on my way over, and he stated that they were up in the Myers parking lot at that point, but could still see you pacing in front of the clubhouse. And I said, okay, please, I'm on my way. I was in a rental car at the time, so I was like, she's not going to recognize me coming in. So I can just come right in. I'm on my way. Please don't leave with her standing out there. Like just hang tight for me. And then when I got there, you had left already at that point, and I spoke with the officer, and he described how you were walking in front of the clubhouse, and took pictures of the front of the clubhouse that appeared and the security guard, and then went over to the dog park and was over there.
Were you notified that I was out walking my dog?
You had your dog with you, but I think the variance there and those two things would make sense. If you were out walking your dog, that would not have raised any alarms. It was the pacing in front of the clubhouse talking. I believe it was reported that you were talking very angrily on your phone and that you were taking pictures of the front of the clubhouse and of the security guard that we had on site. So I think it would be a much different situation if somebody called me and said, "Hey, Bree's out Zoe's out walking her dog." I'd be like,
okay, if you're out driving your car and you've seen the cops, do you typically slow down and look what's going on?
Objection, Your Honor, relevance.
Response on relevance, Ms. Chulsky?
I'm trying to say that it's reason being that if somebody sees the cops, sometimes people are nosy.
Sure. And that would be the basis then that you were paying a little more attention to the office at the day because the police were there?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You know, well, let's, I get that, and we'll save that for the argument, closing arguments in this. So I'll sustain the relevance objection for the time being, so we don't get hung up here, and you may proceed with your questions.
Okay, and then just one final question. On the I want to say the 11th, did you see me with my weapon?
I did not know. I saw you when the cops were around. There was cars. You were kind of by that tree. There was cars here, so I could only see from like here down. Like I
Okay,
said, I'm sorry.
but you did not see me with the weapon.
No, like I said when I was talking about the incident, and I came into the clubhouse. Bree was like, "Hey, the officers want to talk to you." I spun on my heels, walked right back out. He said, when I was walking towards the police officers, they were putting their weapons together, like building them, and I was like, "Oh, what the world?" And he told me, "We have whatever, this is happening. You need to go into the clubhouse, close blinds, turn off the lights." And I was like, "Oh, okay." So I spun and went right back inside. And then I didn't see you until you had come up kind of by that tree. But I didn't know where you were on the property. And it was not so comfy to be walking around in that fishbowl of a clubhouse, closing blinds and turning off lights. Not a situation I wanted to be in, Zoe.
Right. No, I understand.
I know.
So the only way you would have known how far I walked with the weapon would by what you heard.
No, by the police report, actually.
But that's hearsay, though. That's only what you're hearing.
I think it's eyewitness account from non-biased third-party police officers.
Still hearsay, but
Okay.
that's all the questions that I have.
Okay.
All right. Thank you, Ms. Cholsky. Any redirect, Mr. Sustick?
Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Bandalo, you indicated that Cholsky was taking a picture of the security guard.
Mm-hmm.
Was it typical for you to have a security guard at the property?
No.
Why was one there?
Because of the incident on the 11th. I have a team of people that have to go there every day. They were all very uncomfortable. Several of them were incredibly shaken up. And I needed to provide, as in my position, a sense of safety to them. So that is what we did.
So you hired a security guard specifically because of Ms. Cholsky after she was terminated. Is that correct?
Correct.
And thank you. That's it.
Yeah.
I had a couple follow-up questions, Ms. Bandalo. I've heard references to Jason. He's another employee.
Yeah, he's the service manager for the property.
Would he have been in charge of Ms. Cholsky, or are they the same level? What's the relationship?
Yeah. So he would have been her direct supervisor, Bree Filman, the property manager. It's like a management team between those two.
Okay, I understand.
But he had just recently transferred to the property. Wouldn't have been fair to burden him with that uncomfortable situation right out the gate.
Okay, and next question, are you aware, does the Village Green Apartments have any weapons policy on the property?
Yes, you are not supposed to have a weapon in your apartment.
So it's it's supposed to be a weapons-free zone entirely?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right. Is that in the policy handbook or the renter's handbook or whatever?
It's in the lease agreement, yeah.
Okay.
I read the lease agreement. That's not in there.
Okay, all right. No, and I don't have it in front of me, so right, there'd be a factual dispute as to the lease agreement, and it's not real critical to my decision making. It just goes to give me a picture of what the situation is. So, all right, those are all my questions. Any follow-ups? I'll give Mr. Sostek first.
No, Your Honor.
And Ms. Cholsky. Oh, you're muted, Mr.
Oh, sorry. No, I'm all set, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may step down, Ms. Bandalo. Any additional witnesses or evidence to present, Mr. Sosek?
Yes, Your Honor. Bree Filman.
Ms. Filman, would you please unmute and then raise your right hand? Do you solemnly swear or affirm that your testimony today will be the truth and nothing but the truth?
Yes, sir.
Very good. You may proceed, Mr. Sosek.
Thank you. Ms. Filman, did you hear Ms. Bandalo's testimony today?
I did.
Were you present when I'm sorry. Do you believe that's an accurate depiction of the events on the 11th?
I do, yes. I have a slightly different viewpoint from April because I was in a different location for part of the events that happened on April 11th as well as April 17th. But from what she stated, I do agree with.
Okay. Can you tell me about the additional viewpoints that you have on April 11th?
Yes, on April 11th, the situation started in my office, as she said. When Zoe started to walk out of the office, I got up from my desk and started to follow her out of the clubhouse. And I said, Zoe, please hold on. We need to escort you to the service shop to collect your things. And then she said, well, let's effing go, B word. And so I let the door slam and I turned to April and said, I think we should call the police because it felt very tense from her throwing the keys, as well as she had lunged at my desk and I didn't know, that was after she threw the keys. So I already was feeling a little bit threatened and I went toward my desk and grabbed my phone and my keys because I didn't know what she was doing. She ended up grabbing a pen and like holding it up. And she ended up just saying, where's the paper? Because she was, you know, the termination is on a paper that she can either choose to sign or not sign. It doesn't matter. So those three things, the swearing at me, the throwing of the keys and the coming at my desk, just my gut was telling me that it was time to call the police. And then April got up from her desk and we both started walking toward the shop after Zoe. And as I was on the phone with the dispatcher, April said, like, hold on, just wait right here. I'll go. So I stood in the parking lot and observed Zoe's car shaking, like from throwing her tools so hard from the shop. And I was like, oh no, that's not good.
Was that about 30 feet or do you think that's different?
Yeah, I would say about 30 feet. There's room for two vehicles to pass side by side between where her car was parked and where the shop is.
So despite that distance, those tools, when they landed, they A, sound like they were accurately thrown, and B, with a lot of force. Is that correct?
Correct.
Please continue.
So I retreated to the clubhouse after seeing the car shaking, and April had also told me to wait back there. And then I went upstairs in the clubhouse to let another employee who was in another room to be away from the situation. I let her know that it was not safe to come down yet. And then I got a text from April as I was in there saying, need cops now.
Objection, hearsay.
Response on the hearsay objection.
She's recounting her motivation, and we do have a witness here that can corroborate that if need be. So it's more for the effect on the listener.
Okay, so it's not for the truth of the matter asserted, but rather as a present sense impression or the effect on the listener. I'll overrule the hearsay objection and allow that testimony. You may proceed.
So after receiving the text, I became more worried because when I first stated that I felt we needed to call the police, April said I may if it would make me feel more comfortable, but I got the sense that she wasn't sure the police were needed at that point. So for her to text me and say, need cops now, I knew this situation must have escalated further and that there was, you know, clearly a need for police to be there. So I called the police back and explained to them the text I had just received and that I couldn't see what was going on at that point because I was up in the clubhouse, but that if they could get here any faster, it would be appreciated. I then came back downstairs in the clubhouse when I heard April and Jason come back and they explained to me what April had recounted with the throwing of things and whatnot in the shop. Then the police pulled up And I walked out to them. I flagged them down to point them in the direction where we had last seen Zoe. And as I was speaking to the main police officer, the one who had been driving the car, his partner said, "Is that her?" And I looked up, and at the corner of the detached garage, the row of detached garages, I saw Zoe, and she was kind of standing near the tree in the garages. And I said, "Yes, that's her." And then his partner said something about wearing long johns, and I didn't understand what was going on. And then I said, "We just need her to leave. Like, can you ask her to leave the property and kind of de-escalate?" And they said, "We'll need somebody to accompany us," or the head guy said that. And so I walked back into the clubhouse to get April, and that's when she went out there. And then April came back in and said that they had a gun, or that Zoe had a gun.
I'm
And
gonna object to hearsay again on that.
Okay, response on the hearsay objection?
No, that's fine.
Okay, I'll sustain the objection. Please move on to your next question.
So after you heard April say something, please continue on this on April 11th.
So yeah, then it dawned on me that he didn't say long john, he said long gun, and they were talking about their police issued long guns that they were then assembling from their car. And then we closed the blinds and locked all of the doors. I went upstairs to grab the associate who was up there. And I noticed that there were 2 residents working out in the fitness center. So I yelled down to April, "What do we do with the residents?" Because at that point it was a lockdown situation. And she said something to the effect of, "I'm not sure, let me ask HR," and she was phoning people. So I just asked them to come with me. It was an emergency for their safety. And then we all kind of huddled in the clubhouse where we couldn't be seen from windows in case the situation escalated further.
Did you have an opportunity to review the police report?
I did.
Does that seem consistent with your observations from that day?
It does.
Okay. And did you see Zoe go beyond her car?
I did. When I saw her, I was looking at the back side of her, so I just barely caught a glimpse because I was also talking to the police officers. But when they asked me if that was her, I confirmed yes, it was her. And in that moment was when they observed her carrying a weapon, but I was not privy to that information in that moment. I didn't realize what was happening.
Saw where she was and it was beyond her car. Is that correct?
Yes, correct.
And then you were there on, well, let me just go over it. Did any of this make you feel unsafe?
Very. I felt I felt the most scared I've ever felt in my entire life. I felt physically ill, like I was going to throw up. I felt like it was suddenly a very real situation that if the police hadn't shown up the exact moment or second that they did, that she was carrying a loaded gun. And I don't know what her intentions were. Obviously, I'm not in her head. But if the police hadn't shown up in that moment, I don't know that she would have turned around. And that's very scary to me.
You were there on April 17th when the police ended up coming up for a follow-up. Was Ms. Cholsky there on the 17th?
She was. So I was sitting in my office and I had seen the police out my window, and I was like, oh boy, like what's this about now? Because, tensions had been pretty high and I was worried it was about Zoe. So I got up from my desk and escorted them into my office, and the blinds were still open. And it turns out they were just there to do a wellness check, to check in on the staff following the events of April 11th. And as we were talking, they looked out the window and they said, "Is that Zoe?" And I said, yeah, that is Zoe. I'm not sure why she's in front of the clubhouse." And so they said, "Okay, this is a little weird. Has she done this a lot?" And we observed her pacing back and forth in front of the office. And I said, yes, she has once before after the events of April 11th, but it didn't last for this long. So they said, "Okay, we will go sit in the parking lot and just keep an eye on her." And so they parked over by the trash compactor on the east side of the parking lot. And we just kind of tried to go about our day, but it was very hard to ignore the fact that she was out there just pacing. And I would say it was at least 30 times back and forth, and it lasted for at least an hour. I had called April to let her know when the police had first left my office that what Zoe was doing. And she said, "Okay, like, call me back if you need anything." So as it continued, I finally called April back, I would say maybe 20 minutes later, to let April know, like, "Hey, it's continued. None of us are working productively right now. We're all just standing up, staring out the windows because we're nervous of what Zoe's intentions might be." So then April called Officer Brian Johnston, who had been in contact with us throughout this whole week or so. And she then called me back and let me know that the police officers were going to be coming back because they had left the parking lot after they saw Zoe just went to the dog park. And so they were going to come back, and this time parked right in front of the office. And then April arrived, and they filed a police report regarding the events.
In your position as the property manager there, have you ever observed people walking their dogs?
I have.
And did this look like that?
Like the literal action of walking a dog, yes. However, it was beyond just casually walking a dog. It was obsessive, staring through the windows, taking pictures, pacing. I've never once seen a resident walk past the clubhouse more than maybe twice, maybe that way and then back or whatever, but 30 times is a lot. And to be staring at the clubhouse the entire time was very odd behavior.
And as your position as property manager, it's your responsibility to terminate employees, correct?
It is.
Okay. And have you ever had a situation that resulted in you being fearful in the way that you've described?
I have not.
Okay. And do you believe that there are specific threats to you, not just you in the position of your title at the property?
I do. Sorry, what was that?
Why is that?
Her anger was on April 11th was very much directed at my supervisor, April, and myself. She was not angry at Jason. She didn't show any anger toward anyone else other than April and myself. To try and make myself feel better about the situation, I convinced myself that maybe she was just irate and would calm down. But then the following Monday, so April 11th was a Thursday, the following Monday I came into the office to an email showing that Zoe had left a Google review on the property website, or on the property Google page, which wouldn't have bothered me other than the fact that she specifically mentioned me by name and not anyone else. So it became clear to me that she was still fixating on me, and that made the fear still real for me because she was still thinking about me and clearly taking actions toward me.
All right. And was that Google review on April 13th?
It was.
Okay. So we have her termination on April 11th, the Google review on April 13th, her pacing past the office another time before the 17th and on the 17th. Is that correct?
Yes.
And does this continuous pattern, has that made you fearful?
Yes.
And is it more than just, more than 2 incidents?
Of fear?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm seeing a therapist on a weekly basis, sometimes more if I need it. I'm having nightmares. I'm making sure my locks are locked, double, triple checking. Yeah, it's had a major effect on me.
And Ms. Chelsky testified that she was just agitated, had a bad day on the 11th. Do you agree with her assessment, or do you think it's significantly more than she is admitting perhaps to herself?
I agree that she was agitated on that day. However, what scares me is the lack of self-awareness to admit that she wasn't simply putting her gun in her vehicle. And I'm not sure where that narrative is coming from or if it's founded in truth, but what I will say is over the course of working with her, I experienced a very major lack of self-awareness, such as not understanding why it's not appropriate to swear in front of residents or in the office, and things like that. So I think that's what scares me the most is she's not admitting what truly happened and then telling a story that doesn't correlate with what actually happened.
Okay. Thank you. I don't have any further questions for this witness right now, Your Honor.
Cross-examination, Ms. Chelsky.
Yeah. Okay. So, Ms. Filman, can you describe the layout of Knapps Corner Flats for the court?
The layout of the community?
Yeah.
So there's the clubhouse, and then to the west of the clubhouse, there's a building. There's 3 buildings in a line. And then just to the west of that, there is parking spaces. Just to the west of that, there's a parking structure. There's a row of them. They're detached garage buildings, which the service shop is in one of those buildings. And then just to the west of that is more parking, and then the fence line, and then there's the school just past that.
Okay. Where is your office located in the community?
The very center north of the community.
Do you have eye shot of the shop from your office?
I do not.
Okay. So you testified that you were in the office and you saw my car shaking.
I did not testify that. I testified that I was standing in the parking lot when I was on the phone with dispatch. As I watched April walk to the shop, I observed your car shaking so hard. And then I retreated back to the office and for my own personal safety after observing that.
Okay, where were you located when you saw my car shaking? Did you have direct eye shot
I did.
of the shop from that perspective?
I did. I was standing just north of the mailboxes. So when you look in between the 2 detached garage buildings, I had a clear view of your car, and I observed the back hatch was open, and I watched tools fly into the car, and the car shook.
Okay, all right. I guess I was misunderstanding where you were standing. And then on the 11th, how long were the cops there?
Oh, to be honest, it's such a blur. But I would say at least an hour and a half, if not more. I know
Okay.
that your termination was at 1 o'clock, and I know that.
Or I'm sorry. On the 17th. I wrote my notes down wrong.
On the 17th, how long were the cops there?
Yeah.
They were probably there for about 20 to 30 minutes the first time, and then they left for about 10 minutes or so, and then they came back and they were there for another 45 minutes to an hour.
And then at which time did you see me in front of the office? The first time or the second time?
I observed you in front of the office the entire time. We were so scared that we couldn't work. We were staring out the windows, and I watched you the whole time. And then I watched you go to the dog park and then come back to pacing.
Okay, yeah, from my perspective, I only saw the cops there once.
Okay.
Objection, testifying.
Yep. Please phrase those as questions, Ms. Chilsky, so you may
Yes,
proceed.
yep. Okay, how many did you count how many times I walked in front of the office?
I wasn't physically standing there with a piece of paper making tally marks on it. However, I was very aware of it wasn't just twice or 3 times or 4 times. It was far beyond a normal amount to pace in front of the office or to walk a dog in front of the office.
So I mean, it could have been 100 times. It could have been 10. It could have been 5.
No, I would say it was well beyond 10 times.
Okay. And then going back to the Google review, how often do you get Google reviews?
It depends, at least twice a month, sometimes more.
Do you sometimes get bad ones? Do you sometimes you get good ones?
Yes.
So it's fairly commonplace that you would get a bad one or a good one.
Yes, however, the difference would be I've never received a review that said if you hear the name Bree, I advise you to seek alternative options.
But name dropping does occur in Google reviews, though, correct?
In my experience, I've never had a name dropped in a negative review, only a positive review.
Okay, but it does happen though.
Yes.
Okay. And then you said that you were seeing a therapist. Were you seeing that therapist before the events of the 11th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. That's all the questions I have.
Thank you. I did have a couple. Are you aware of any weapons policy at Knapps Corner Flats, Ms. Filman?
Yes, so we do allow weapons in their leased apartment spaces per the lease. However, they're not allowed to be openly carried in common areas, including hallways and parking lots.
Does it state that in the lease agreement or the handbook?
It does in the lease agreement.
Okay. And the dog park that I've heard some testimony about, is that located on the property?
Yes, it's on the northwest side of the property, so it's north of the service shop.
And is it a public dog park or is it limited to residents only?
It's private for residential use only.
Okay. All right. Those are all of my questions. Any follow-ups, Mr. Sosnick?
No.
And Ms. Kolsky, last chance.
No, I don't think so. I do dispute the
Objection, Your Honor.
factual weapons
Yeah, I'm going to
policy.
I'll let you make a closing argument, Ms. Chilsky, but for the moment, Ms. Filman, you may step down from the witness stand. Any additional witnesses or evidence to place in the record at this time, Mr. Sosnick?
Not that is not already included in petitioner's response, Your Honor.
Very good. Then I will allow closing arguments. At this point, Ms. Chilsky, you can go first since you are the respondent and the movant.
Okay. So basically, it from the testimony, neither one of the respondents, petitioners, saw me with a firearm. That would have been all hearsay from the police, whether or not I had one or not. And Bree did say that reviews are commonplace and name dropping does occur. But it's just, it comes down to feelings are very subjective. I might feel more threatened than others. I talked to Jason. He didn't feel threatened by the whole thing.
And he doesn't have a protective order either.
Right. So it's feelings are very subjective. I might be more scared of something than Bree or April might be, or even Miss Sostak. That's what I think this comes down to, is they felt scared. That may not have been my intention, and I do apologize if that's what happened. That was not my intention at all. It was it was bad timing and bad decisions. That's what it was.
All right, very good. Thank you, Ms. Chilsky. Mr. Sostak?
Yes. So on April 11th, Ms. Chulsky threw keys and a tool, and she lunged at one of the petitioners, and she held a pen up, and the whole property needed to go on lockdown by order of the police. In these situations, I think it is objectively reasonable that a person would be fearful, and in fact, subjectively, the petitioners did state that they were fearful. And it wasn't just this one incident. In addition, the respondent on the 13th continued her agitation, which she agrees she was agitated via writing a Google review. We had testimony that she paced in front of the office, which is harassing to the petitioners at their workplace. On the second incident of that, on the 17th, the police were there. She paced more than 30 times, and the police were there to do a wellness check. So the police objectively believed that there was a situation that required a wellness check. In addition, Ms. Chulsky, the respondent, caused a person to linger at one of the petitioner's residences after the PPO was in place. It was more than just delivering papers. And while Ms. Chulsky said that she received her address from the PPO, the court procedures put that information as confidential. And in fact, in this file, there is no address on Ms. Bandalo's actual PPO application or order. There is a separate attachment called confidential information. And an assertion to the contrary would either be an exceptional lapse of the policies of the PPO office to give a respondent the petitioner that address, or there's something else going on. I don't have a clear answer, but it certainly wasn't.
I will very happily provide the PPO.
Yeah, no, and I can say in clarification and that there is an option to keep the petitioner's address confidential provided by the PPO office. However, I did hear Ms. Bandalo state that she did it online. I am uncertain when one does one online if it's that clear what you have to do to keep your address confidential. And so can state that I'm looking at actually my signed PPO here does contain, and sometimes petitioners, because there's already awareness of the address, a variety of reasons don't keep it. It's not, in other words, universally confidential. It has to be separately requested, and I didn't see that happened, and it could be because it was online, not necessarily the oversight of the PPO office. When they get the online ones, I think they just process them electronically. They don't ask questions as they would when a person comes into the PPO office. So all that being said, everyone can be being upfront and honest here, and there's no conflict of the testimony. It is possible for your address to appear on the PPO, and that could certainly be the way that a person obtained it.
So we have a continuity of purpose between April 11th, the 13th, some date between the 13th and the 17th, on the 17th, and then after May, that the respondent has in some way harassed or threatened the petitioners. It's not one instance. It is the most extreme instance that either of these property managers have ever seen in terms of a termination. There is admitted mental issues from the respondent that include harm, well, to herself. There's a harm component to it. And the property actually specifically had to hire a security guard because the staff there was concerned about Ms. Chulsky. This is not a standard situation with the termination. There's nothing standard about what happened here. The police report states that they considered locking down the school nearby. There is a difference between intention and outcome, and there is a difference between feelings. But here, the outcome is that everyone but Ms. Chulsky was very concerned about not just one incident, but a continuing pattern of incidents. And it was bad timing, and it was a bad decision, and it's ongoing. And the petitioners are fearful, I believe rightfully so, and they request that the PPO stay in force.
All right, thank you. Well, I have heard the testimony and reviewed the evidence submitted to the court today. And, the elephant in the room in this case is the presence of the weapon. I think absent the incident with the weapon, that this would go down as a contentious and emotional termination of a job and termination of tenancy. As I said before, those are normally emotions run high. However, the introduction of the weapon did escalate everything, and the fact that the weapon wasn't necessarily seen by the petitioners in this case, but was reported to them by police officers, really doesn't matter. They were made aware, that there was a weapon on the scene. And I totally believe Ms. Chulsky that her intention was simply to put it in the car. However, she has acknowledged that was poor judgment, and in fact, probably knows how to store that weapon properly in the car, and acknowledges that, well, I put it in there and didn't get it again in there the right way, and thus subsequently did get arrested for it. So, there was a reasonable fear that it would be objectively reasonable, not just subjectively reasonable. And the policy of the Village Green as to weapons does play into this. Of course, if one goes to a firing range or something like that, you expect to see weapons carried and up to the firing line and things of that nature. However, this is a facility or a private property where there isn't a permission to openly carry weapons anywhere you want. We do have the Second Amendment, but that only applies to public property. Private property can set their own policies, and for that reason, many private facilities do set more restrictive weapons policy. So you wouldn't expect to see a weapon at the Village Green Apartments. It would seem out of place and alarming, given the rest of the circumstances, which are this emotional scene. And there also is uncontroverted testimony that Ms. Chulsky was understandably emotional at the time, and the result was throwing property, probably not with the intent and not with the outcome to injure anyone either, but in an angry manner that would be consistent with a person who had just lost their job and their place to live. There would be high emotions and stress, and certainly would be expected and reasonable to have those angry responses. However, when the firearm factor is added into the situation, that does escalate it and make it a situation where objectively a person would be placed in regard, in concern for their welfare. Further, the follow-on visit later in April to the property by Ms. Chulsky, although again, there's walking my dog and going to the dog park, and then they're stopping in front of the same exact clubhouse that, of course, without Ms. Chulsky necessarily knowing, but with doubtless Ms. Bandalo and Ms. Filman, although Ms. Bandalo wasn't present that day, only Ms. Filman was present, recalling that was the scene of the very lockdown, and that photographing that, and again, totally explicable from Ms. Chulsky's perception, if there are police there, and after all, she was just involved with a police incident, she might be curious if the police were following up or doing further investigation as to her. However, her actions, however reasonable they seem to her, also could be perceived as threatening by Miss Filman and then indirectly by Miss Bandalo because she communicated it to her, and Miss Bandalo no doubt thinks, gosh, here we go again with a dangerous situation at the Village Green that she's ultimately responsible for. So I do think that the petitioners have sustained their burden of establishing two incidents that objectively could be perceived as threatening or harassing by the average person. I'm going to leave the PPO in place at this time. For that reason, I would like to commend Ms. Chilsky on observing it. Having your mother serve the PPO again, nothing illegal or improper necessarily about that, as long as she's an adult that's 18 years of age and over. However, that could result in some. I didn't hear any allegation that Miss Chelsky had told her mother what to do, but if she's like my mother, she doesn't always do what she's told to do anyway. So that very understandable that things like that could happen. So, like I say, the other thing that's very encouraging to me, and glad Judge Abood took an hour with this, and I took an hour with that, is whatever happened on those days. The appearance of the parties in court here with counsel and your testimony and Ms. Chilsky's representation of herself have been very
Unique.
informative. Yeah, no, I'd say informative as to what really went on, and do give because another person in the heat of the moment, of course, can't see what's happening in your head, and hopefully your explanations and your conduct since the protective order, and I haven't seen a flood of violations come in as I sometimes do with these. It appears that you're following the protective order. I hope puts everyone at ease that this is now behind us, and the parties did go through an emotional thing together and are growing towards healing because when trauma does occur, it also doesn't go away, or sometimes it persists for a while, and new events re-trigger it and things like that. However, over time, without any escalation of the trauma, it certainly is possible to get to healing. And I often reflect that sometimes what we do in the courts here by our lengthy, drawn out due process that we provide and the amount of time it takes to get things heard sometimes, can at its best help with resolution of some of that trauma. And I think everyone's participation today and clarity and honesty in testifying has been very helpful for that. So the protective orders will remain in place. I do note they both have expiration dates in October. I do expect them to be obeyed by you, Ms. Chilsky, during that time. However, from everything I've heard today, it seems like you're the type of person who can totally understand what's meant and imported by a protective order and follow it. So I'm confident that you'll be able to do that going forward. I do appreciate your testimony today.
Can I say a few words?
You may go ahead.
I really want to apologize to both Miss Bandalo and Miss Filman. This was not how that was supposed to go down. I grabbed a firearm. I was going to take it to an ex-friend of mine who would have corroborated it, but I didn't want to put his job in jeopardy. Bad decisions, bad timing. We both, all of us have had trauma in this whole thing. I got kicked out. You felt threatened. It was not my intention. And I sincerely want to apologize for that.
Thank you, Ms. Chilsky. That may contribute, I think, towards some resolution of the matter in everyone's mind here. So, no, and again, I do thank everyone for your civility today during this process. I have to close at this point because I'm already 30 minutes late for my judges meeting, although fortunately you can usually summarize like most meetings, those meetings within about 5 minutes, so I'm sure I can catch up. So grateful for everyone for attending and being very civil today, including your advocacy. Nice job. Am I saying your name right, Mr. Sostek?
You are.
Oh, okay. That was just a wild guess.
It was
Glad I
pleasing.
got it correct. Very pleased to meet you, and thank you again. With that, we're concluded.
Thank you very much, Robert.